समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
While Donald Trump yo-yos between his profanities and peacemaking, it's such an embarrassment that he put those profanities out over the Easter weekend. So much so that I saw some people on Twitter saying that India's Prime Minister, India is mostly a Hindu country with a very large majority of Hindus, very small Christian minority, and yet his Easter message, Indian Prime Minister's Easter message, was much more dignified and affectionate than the American Christian president's message or his messaging on his Easter weekend. That said, he's been yo-yoing between I will come and destroy everything, I will leave no weapon not used, things that you've never seen before, or that we are about to make peace. That's the reason I said he's yo-yoing between profanities and peacemaking. And that has given us a day's break from what's going on in the Gulf War. I suspect we'll be back at it in a day. But for now, we can focus on something that's happened domestically. That is India commissioning its third nuclear weapons submarine. Nuclear weapons submarine. It's an SSBN. Once again, I had explained it in episode 15.1.2, but I shall do it again. There are two kinds of nuclear submarines, SSNs and SSBNs. SSN is submersible ship nuclear. That is a nuclear submarine, a vanilla nuclear submarine that carries conventional weapons. That's a submarine of the kind that the US used to sink IRIS Dana in Indian Ocean. That was USS Charlotte. That is an SSN. The other category is SSBN. SSBN stands for Submersible Ship Ballistic Nuclear. So SSN is a submersible ship, runs on a nuclear reactor, does not use diesel electric as conventional submarines do. SSBN also runs on a nuclear reactor, but also carries nuclear ballistic missiles. That's the difference. India has set up, much before India started planning to build SSNs, India moved into the SSBN area. And third of those has just been commissioned, INS Aridhaman. We will talk about that. We've talked about the program in the past, as I told you in episode 15.1.2. I will share a link in the description as well. Before I get deeper, no pun intended, deeper into the SSBN issue, let me also tell you that this has been a particularly happy week for us at ThePrint. That's because two of our colleagues have got two stellar awards. So Praveen Jain, our national photo editor, he's got the Ramnath Goenka Award for his pictures, for a story that he had done from the most distant parts of eastern UP, villages bordering Nepal, which were getting neither electricity nor signal in their phones. That's how they ran the No Tower, No Power campaign. Many of these are surrounded by Nepalese territory and they were using signal from the Nepalese side. Praveen Jain and Apurva Mandhani went out that far and did stories, sometimes taking boats to these deeply mosquito-infested villages. For pictures with that story, Praveen Jain got the Ramnath Goenka Award and Apurva Mandhani won our second award for this week at the Danish Siddiqui Awards. Danish Siddiqui Awards. She won the award in a really deep investigation into family connections among our judges. These are looking at 700 judges in terms of who's a first generation lawyer or judge, who's a second generation, sometimes she found it the seventh generation, and how many judges are related to other judges or are children or nephews and nieces of other judges. That was a very extensive investigation of 700 cases. If you haven't read it, please read that. I will share links with you of both stories, and also you will see some of these on your screens as well, some screenshots on your screens as well. That said, having held forth on in-depth journalism that my colleagues have done and done us so much proud to get us these awards, let me come back to the issue today, which is something the deadliest machine that sits very deep underwater. That is SSBN. India has just commissioned the third. INS Aridhaman is the third. This series is named, as we can see, Ari. Ari means enemy, Dushman. The first was Arihant, second was Arighat, third is Aridhaman, all mean the same thing. Hant, Ghat, Daman all means destruction. So one that destroys the enemy. A fourth one is in the works. I think will be out not that much time, maybe another year and a half. And then a fifth in this series. Once these five come, then you will say that India will have a truly credible triad. What is a triad? A nuclear triad is essential to deterrence. You don't make nuclear weapons for using. No country that makes nuclear weapons ever hopes to use it. In fact, all countries hope and pray they never have to use it, because you know that one side will not use nuclear weapons. Mostly Americans might have done it in Japan when they did it, but not now. Definitely not when you have nuclear adversaries, or if you need to use them against nuclear adversaries. There it becomes purely an instrument of deterrence. Deterrence is, if you use nuclear weapons against me, I will use 10 times as many and I will deter you. But the other side might say, but I know where your nuclear weapons are, because after all there are satellites, there is electronic intelligence, there is human intelligence. Most countries will know many of the locations of the others' nuclear weapons, nuclear missiles, etc. That's why you distribute your nuclear weapons or your strategic deterrence in three places, in three places or in three dimensions. One is simple, your gravity dropped bombs. That is like the Hiroshima bomb. You can put it, you can sling it under a big fighter aircraft. A Rafale can carry it, Mirage 2000 can carry it, Sukhoi 30 MKI can carry it. But increasingly now, the value and use of gravity bombs is becoming less, because that means an aircraft has to go that far into your adversary's territory, because you are not going to drop a nuclear weapon 100 kilometers away from your borders or 10 kilometers away. It has to be really far away. Increasingly, the value of gravity bombs is coming down. Now, the more advanced nations are able to have air-launched missiles which are nuclear tipped. Air-launched missiles which carry nuclear warheads. India still doesn't have them. I presume that is something that's in the works. Pakistanis don't have that either. I don't know what they are doing, but I know for sure that on our side, our integrated guided missile development program is looking at something like this also in partnership with Strategic Forces Command, but I don't know what's going on. The second dimension of this is land. Your missiles on land, that India has plenty of. All of India's ballistic missiles are nuclear capable. Not all have been given a nuclear warhead. That will be only a selected few, but Prithvi can go up to 350 kilometers. That covers most of Pakistan if that's India's target. And then we have various iterations of Agni 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 now, credibly going up to about 5,000 kilometers. That, God forbid, if it ever has to be used, can cover almost all of China from some place deep inside India. However, it would still be either on a launcher that can be tracked, or underground, or wherever these things are kept. And satellites and movements are also being watched to strengthen our land-based deterrent. India has also experimented with railway launched missile capability, which means a launcher can travel on a train, go from one place to the other, makes it that much tougher for an adversary to take it out. Because what will an adversary usually do? If the adversary thinks that I'm going to use nuclear weapons against the other side. In case of India specifically, because India has a publicly stated no first use doctrine, NFU. India's nuclear doctrine is public. It's on the web. You can go and read it. I will also share a link with you. India says India will never use nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction against anybody first. But if somebody uses any nuclear weapons or any weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, nuclear against India, nuclear means mega nuclear, mini nuclear, micro nuclear, tactical nuclear, whatever, then the response will be massive, disproportionate, and totally destructive. That's why any adversary, in this case, the usual suspect would be Pakistan, if they decide to use a nuclear weapon, because they are the ones who talk about nuclear weapons loosely quite often, particularly tactical nuclear weapons. And they think if they use odd tactical nuclear weapon, they can get away with it. They can be a temptation to take out all of India's nuclear weapons on the ground and then to say, air, I can manage. And then to say, air, I can manage. In any case, who goes that far inside somebody's airspace to drop a nuclear weapon? That era is gone. To prevent that and to cover for that most unlikely possibility, you need a third dimension. That third dimension is not on water. You can put nuclear launchers on ships, but ships are easy to find. They're easy to find, they're difficult to hide, they don't move very fast. You can track these ships, and you can also figure out which ship is carrying nuclear launcher. Surface ship carrying nuclear weapons is not your third dimension. It has to be something deep underwater and should be able to stay deep underwater for a very long time with a proper protocol as to when to launch. That's why countries that want to build a triad need a nuclear powered submarine that also carries nuclear weapons. Why nuclear powered? Why can't you put these on a conventional submarine? That's because a conventional submarine has limitations to how much time it can remain underwater. After some time, it has to come up to snorkel to get more oxygen to recharge its batteries. Some of the newer submarines with air-independent propulsion, they can stay underwater for longer, but still not long enough. They will come out at some point and some satellite, some surveillance will pick them up, and from then they can start plotting them. An SSBN, on the other hand, runs on a nuclear reactor. Indian submarines, for example, Indian SSBNs, the current one, Aridhaman, runs on an 83 megawatt nuclear reactor. 83 megawatt compact light water reactor, LWR reactor. It uses uranium, but remember, not uranium enriched to the degree where it can become a weapon, because the engine, the reactor is not the weapon. Where that uranium comes from, don't ask me. India has sufficient output of uranium of its own from those nuclear installations which have been declared military under the Indo-US nuclear deal. India has now carried out a clear separation of civil and military. And what is military can be used for, obviously, military purposes. So India has sources of its own uranium. These facilities, the military facilities, are not safeguarded. Safeguarded, they are safe, not safeguarded in the sense that they are not subject to the UN IAEA's safeguards. That means the inspectors of International Atomic Energy Agency do not come to these installations. Wherever most of our other power plants where we import our uranium, those are all subject to IAEA safeguards. Those are the civil nuclear installations. That is the difference that we need to understand. What does an SSBN do? An SSBN can sit underwater for months together. In fact, it can sit underwater indefinitely because it's the same fuel that's being used. It needs a lot of water for cooling it, but it's recirculating that water. The time that it can spend underwater is only limited by two things. One, by the amount of food, etc., and provisions that it can carry. And second, by simple human endurance, because staying underwater is a very challenging thing. Submariners have among the toughest jobs in the world. Now, even in a normal submarine, in a conventional submarine, it's very tough because spaces are limited, it's very cramped, you are underwater for a long time. But in this case, for an SSBN, you are underwater for months at the same time. The second thing we have to remember is that an SSBN, it's counterintuitive, but an SSBN actually is less quiet. It makes more noise, more acoustic noise, not noise that you and I hear, more acoustic noise for sensors to pick up, simply because circulates coolant inside, and that's what makes a bit of a racket. That's why usually countries will not send their SSBNs too far away from them. Also, an SSBN in India's context does not have to go too far. It does not have to go and sit deep inside Pacific someplace. It can be someplace in the Bay of Bengal, or maybe the other side of Indian Ocean, south of the Indian coast, and still cover most of the territory of India's interest. The message is that you cannot be sure. You may try what you want. You may think you have the best intelligence. Somebody's satellites are telling you what is where, but they will always be something. You will always have to cater to the possibility that, or maybe inevitability or lack of certainty, that there will be something hanging somewhere underwater that will then carry out devastating retribution on you. For this to be credible, you have to have 2 or 3 of these boats underwater at any point of time. These need frequent servicing, maintenance, and also the human beings who are inside these submarines away for a long time on long voyages underwater, they also need recovery time. So if you have 3, you can't have 3 in water all the time. Once you have the 5, then you can be reasonably confident at least 3 will be operationally deployed. Even if you had 3 now, you can say maybe 1 or 2 will be operationally deployed, but once you have 5, you can have about 3, and that is when your deterrence triad becomes more complete. Once that is done, India is not stopping there. After that, India plans to bring the next series that will be bigger, that will have bigger reactors also, and maybe more weapons as well. That said, once we understand the basics, I will tell you about these submarines. The submarine we talked about the last time, INS Arighat, that was a 6,000 ton displacement submarine. What is displacement? Displacement is the weight of water that is displayed once a vessel goes into water, which means the weight of the vessel plus everything that's inside it: personnel, missiles, food, water, everything. That is the displacement. Larger the displacement, bigger the boat. The latest one, Aridhaman, is 7,000 tons. So it's a bit bigger than the last one. It's also in size bigger. The last one was 101.6 meters. This is about 124, 125 meters. The width, or what in naval language would be called the beam, is 11 meters in both cases. The basic difference between the two is the weaponry they carry. Our 2 submarines which are in water already, that is Arihant and Arighat, they carry missiles or missile tubes, 4 missile tubes that carry K-15 missiles. These are missiles in the 750 kilometer range, K-15 missiles. Now India has tested the K-4 missile. That missile has been tested from a submerged platform, not from a submarine, but from a submerged platform. The K-4 missile can reach 3,500 kilometers. This new submarine, Aridhaman, and that's why it also has more displacement, it's heavier, it carries 8 missile tubes. Its 2 older sisters carried 4 missile tubes each. That is Arihant and Arighat, and the third one now, Aridhaman, carries 8 missile tubes. It can carry both K-15 missiles and K-4 missiles. Also, by this time, because Indian engineering is getting better, and many private companies are also working on this project. Larsen & Toubro is working. In fact, I had mentioned it earlier. When you go to Larsen & Toubro's headquarters in Mumbai, one of the things they've displayed with pride is a model of one of these Arihant class boats, as these are called. Larsen & Toubro has worked on this. Tata Power Systems have worked on this. They've made control systems. And then Walchand Nagar, which has worked with high-tech defense stuff for a very long time, they have built steam turbines for this project. And a lot of other organizations are putting their capabilities with improvements that are taking place as each new version comes out, as new edition comes out. The reactor is also becoming quieter. So the acoustic signature of Aridhaman is lower than Arighat. And the presumption is, as the next boats come and heavier boats come, bigger boats come, they will be even more sophisticated. Just to understand the size business, the Chinese have 6 boats in what is called as the Jin class or JL3s. They have a displacement or a tonnage of 13,000. So they are about twice as big as Indian SSBNs. But you know what? With this business, with the deterrent business, and Dr. Subramaniam and General Sundarji used to say, more is not needed when less is enough. Which means as long as you have the ability to deliver 1, 2, 3, 4, some hits accurately on an adversary and credibly so, that gives you the deterrence. So it's not just that you have to keep piling up more and more weapons. Once again, they would always say more is not needed when less is enough, because that is the nature of nuclear weapons. The thing with nuclear weapons is that once you start with them, then you can't say, I have 2 bombs, that's enough. Then you have to look at deterrence and go into second dimension, third dimension. So India started thinking of a nuclear weapons submarine in 1974 itself, when Pokhran 1 took place, although Mrs. Gandhi's government called it a peaceful nuclear explosion. At that point, India set up a project in its defense research group that was called Project 932. You might even find some stories that I probably did about this, either for the Indian Express earlier, say before 1983, or in India Today magazine. I'm sure there's a couple like that. Project 932. Then it came to be named Advanced Technology Vehicle. Advanced Technology Vehicle is also something that was spoken about in hush-hush tones. Nobody knew any details. In any case, those who knew did not talk about this. It was George Fernandez, as India's defense minister, who first made this public formally in 1998 in Parliament. He said that India was working on its nuclear triad by building a submarine capacity. That was after India formally became a nuclear weapons power. Well, all of this, India became formally a nuclear power in 1998. India made a public disclosure. It was working on an ATV, as it was then called. From then until the launch of the first SSBN, that is INS Arihant, took more than 10 years. It was in 2009 that Arihant was launched. In 2016, it was commissioned quietly. It took 7 years. The current one, the latest one, Aridhaman, was launched in 2021. It's been launched now. It was scheduled to be launched last year, but still it's now 5 years. What was 7 has now become 5. I suspect the next one will come out even earlier, because India is mastering this technology and engineering now. Even with the launch of this one, there was no ceremony, nothing. It was quietly launched in Vizag. All we saw was a cryptic, or maybe not so cryptic, tweet by Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh that said it's not words but power, full stop, and in single quotes, Aridhaman, which means Aridhaman was now working. Now, how significant is this? First of all, to build a nuclear reactor for a submarine is very complicated. And to build a nuclear submarine takes time, even a conventional one. Australia signed the AUKUS agreement with UK and America. Both have been building nuclear submarines for a very long time. The first SSN, these are SSNs, the first Australian SSN under this joint arrangement will not come out before 2032. That's almost 7-8 years for the first one to come out. It is complicated. India focused so far only on the technology of building SSBNs, because that was essential for the triad to be credible. That has made India only the 6th country in the world to have this ability. The other 5 are the usual suspects, the P5, permanent 5 in the UN Security Council, US, France, Britain, China, and Russia. And as we speak, India is still some distance away from building its own SSNs. In fact, 2 SSN boats have been approved. They've been budgeted for, work has started, but these boats, SSN, non-nuclear, SSN, not SSBN, SSN, nuclear powered but not carrying nuclear weapons. These are likely to come out only between 2036 and 37. That's how complicated this engineering is. India, by the way, has experience in operating SSNs. Those were under Indian Navy. Those were leased. The first one from Soviet Union, second from Russia. The first was a Charlie class. The second was an Akula class called Chakra, INS Chakra. A third one is due but delayed, maybe because of production delays in Russia. That will also be Akula class. A key difference, however, needs to be understood. These submarines that India leased earlier and the ones that come in the SSNs, they are all operated by the Indian Navy, whereas SSBNs do not fall under the Indian Navy. SSBNs are part of your nuclear assets, your strategic assets. These fall under the Strategic Forces Command, and even the budget for these does not come from the defense budget. It comes from a separately allocated budget for the Strategic Forces Command.